Hello and welcome to the next edition of my podcast today. I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor. It's been a long time since me and Andy spoke. It's been 2 months since the last podcast after Wigan suffered relegation. And a lot has changed since then. 16 players have left, Paul Cook. And there's been so many developments which we're going to recap in this podcast. So first and foremost, Andy, how have you been?
Not too bad, Jay. It's been a tough time, not just for Wigan Athletic, but the general picture's not been great, has it, over the summer across Greater Manchester? We've had a tough time, and we're just all hoping, aren't we, that better days will lie ahead for us all with the virus, but also for Wigan Athletic. We're all still rooting for you.
Absolutely. We're here to talk about Wigan Athletic today, and first and foremost is, have you been keeping up with developments at the Erie Stadium?
Yeah, I've been keeping a very close eye on things, Jay. I do follow what's going on. It's a complicated situation, isn't it? But I speak to Lisa Nunes a lot, and I'm aware of some of the things from her perspective, and I think Lisa's done a brilliant job, actually. So yeah, I am. I'm, as I say, keeping a real close eye on things, and like everybody, wanting this to be over as soon as possible, and the opportunity for Wigan to enter a new era.
How has Lisa Nunes been keeping you in the loop?
We've just kept in touch from time to time. As issues have happened, I've got in touch with her saying what's the backstory here, or we just kept in close touch. And I think it's important that people know that we do have that kind of level of interest in what's going on. I think sometimes people think of politicians that it's kind of, oh, there might be a chance to sort of say something that gets in the media. It's not like that at all. We both care massively about this football club. We looking at the detail. Lisa certainly is immersed in the detail and actually in the sort of kind of the efforts to save the club. So we're just wanting to obviously see things move beyond the current phase as quickly as possible.
What have you and Lisa been doing to help out?
Well, obviously, there's without going through all of the ins and outs. I mean, I don't think people would expect me to do that, but there obviously is a role for various players here. The Football League has a role, and Lisa and I have had a conversation with them. The council, of course, has a role with its sort of ongoing involvement in the stadium. So, there's lots of players here, and what we're trying to do is get things to the best possible situation that we can for Wigan Athletic. So, yeah, it's been frustrating, Jay. If I'm honest, I thought when we spoke last time, I thought hopefully things would have been sorted out by now. But it feels to me that this has gone on. This has gone on too long, to be honest.
Where do your frustrations lie?
My frustrations. It's hard to say. I mean, I have kind of raised concerns about the administration process, and I ended up having an exchange with those involved. And I don't want to sort of characterize things or talk beyond what I know, but what I do see gives me some cause for concern, and I've voiced those concerns, because obviously the longer this thing goes on, the more it costs, the more that the kind of confidence sort of drains away, and I think it's right for somebody in my position to speak up for the supporters. The accusation is, oh, you're doing it just to get involved in politics. Well, no, to be honest, I've got a lot on my plate at the moment, and I don't necessarily, the suggestion that we only ever get involved in things just for publicity. Well, that's I can tell you now a complete nonsense. We get involved because we know the critical role that this football club plays in the life of our borough and our communities, and that's why we're involved. And what we're challenging at times is an administration process that hasn't moved with the urgency that I would have liked to have seen.
Have you understood the concerns of the Wigan Athletic fans of the job that the administrators are doing? I know that protest even took place in Deansgate outside the Burbies Trainer HQ by the Wigan Athletic Grievance Society. What do you think about that, and can you kind of relate to the fans?
Oh, I can, of course. If it was Everton, I can assure you, I would be out there protesting as well, because we want a conclusion to it, don't we? And anyone who's in a position where you can have some influence over the fate of something that people care about, then there's going to be voices raised. There's going to be protests, and that's one thing I would say. With respect to the administrators, I think perhaps more allowance needs to be made for that. You can't kind of shroud everything in sort of secrecy at times, or kind of stop people raising concerns. Football matters to people. People will voice opinions about it. There'll be information on social media that because people want to know what's going on. They care about their football club, and I think that passion. In some ways, I read the latest statement from the administrators, and it's almost as if that passion is a problem. Well, I'd say the complete opposite. It's the best selling point that this football club has got. There are people who will do anything to save this football club, and I would say that's a fantastic thing that needs to kind of be understood by any potential buyer, rather than trying to sort of kind of silence people on social media. I mean, without going into the ins and outs of it, they've got a job to do. It's a difficult job to do, selling a football club in a pandemic. We understand that. But, I think the time is coming here to sort of move this thing forward and bring things to a conclusion. You
mentioned the administrative statement that released earlier this week. What did you actually make of that? Because I know a lot of fans are quite frustrated by reading that, because although they tried to be open and transparent, it seemed to be the case that the administrators were almost blaming the fans and social media for a deal not taking place.
Well, that's what I was alluding to when I said that a moment ago. Football's a goldfish bowl, isn't it? And, people are going to comment. And I don't think, any potential buyer that's put off by a few comments on social media, well, really? So I don't know. I mean, I raised an eyebrow or two at those statements, and I think the problem is, of course, there was reference made to non-disclosure agreements. The longer this goes on with those kind of agreements in place, is only going to build frustration, isn't it, amongst people? And as I say, don't blame the fans for that. That's a selling point in my view, that people care and care so much. Because if I was a potential buyer, I would want to know that people cared about this football club.
With the administrators, what would you like to see from them over the next few weeks? Because I feel like throughout this process, the fans have always been told kind of similar lines of others interested parties. But we're almost 3 months into administration. I understand that it's a long process. A lot of clubs do take a while to get out of administration. The earliest administration process was 3 months at Bolton Wanderers. So I know it is a lengthy process, but I feel like there's not been much progress in terms of finding a buyer.
Yeah, I think, I do have to point out that it's not easy to sell a football club in the current circumstances, is it? Because we're looking at a situation now with fans not being allowed back into grounds for some time. It's a challenging outlook, isn't it, for League One football right now? And I think we have to acknowledge that. We do. But having said that, we will get through this. And this football club is a fantastic investment. If you want to be involved in English football, then I can't see a better opportunity than this football club. But the longer it goes on, the more the more that sort of the viability becomes perhaps more shaky. And so there is a need to move it and move it on. As far as I can see, there's been a lot of interest in the club, and I think it's about turning it into results now, isn't it? And into kind of clear conclusions. I think I'm not going to comment on the ins and outs. I did raise concerns, Jay, about the sale of the training ground. Now, I know that the ownership of that was kind of complicated, but I do raise concerns about the sale of that Premier League standard training ground, because obviously that could have been an attractive thing, I think, to other buyers who maybe hadn't yet shown their hand, and also the number of players that have now left. The longer it goes on, the more that happens, the more that actually some buyers may be put off. So I would say it's the length of time this is taking that might deter potential buyers, as opposed to any comments that fans might be making on social media.
In terms of the administrators, are you going to be putting pressure on them over the next couple of months to obviously hurry up the process, speed up like you've mentioned?
Well, as I say, I've made some of my comments public, and I did on those issues that I've just mentioned. We ended up having an exchange, and I won't go into all of the details of that exchange. And I will correct the record if I've said something that's proven to be wrong. I will always correct the record, but I can't have somebody with responsibility for an institution that matters massively to the people of Greater Manchester, in some ways almost trying to shut down debate about it. I'm not going to have that. And also to suggest that whenever concerns are raised, it's political sort of posturing or somehow, publicity seeking. Well, I'm afraid it's none of those things. We've got a job to do. I'm a kind of unique position, actually, in that, I'm the only politician that is elected by all of parts of the Wigan borough. That no one else. I'm the only person who can say that. Obviously, the MPs are only elected by parts of it. I was grateful to have support from people across the whole of the Wigan borough. So, I've got a voice here to be used on behalf of people who are worried right now. And I think the administrator, rather than being defensive at times, needs to engage more and work with us to find solutions.
Obviously, with the administrators as well, fans have been obviously very concerned, and they have called for an investigation against the process they've been carrying out, because I know fans have been afraid that they have been asset stripping. What do you echo these views?
Well, I did raise concern about the sale of some assets, and I went on the record with that. But the administrators, some of them came back to me and said, "Well, hang on a minute, you don't know the ins and outs of the finances," and that's true. I don't know all of the ins and outs, but simply I'm entitled to raise concerns because I think the problem with the process is that it's that vacuum really of information at times that then leads to the frustration that then leads to the sort of comments being made that they find challenging. Well, it's linked to the fact that there isn't enough openness about what's going on, and you see names being kind of entering the public domain about people who might be interested in buying it, who the fans won't accept. All of that, I think, kind of it builds a kind of unhelpful climate where you get rumours and all of that. And I just think the way the process has been handled has kind of added to that rather than sort of kept it in a much more sort of I don't know, in a more open way.
I completely agree with that. In terms of the administrators, the last thing I want to mention on the admins, what would you like to see from them over the next few weeks?
Well, I think urgency is the one thing I would say. I mean, there is interest in the club, that's clear. So let's bring that interest to a conclusion. Let's flush out the issues that are barriers to a sale. I think what I would say to the supporters at the moment is that obviously we want the administrators to conclude this job in a way that's acceptable to the Wigan supporters. I think recognising that they have got a job to do. They've been appointed by the court to do a job that is what they've been asked to do. But at the same time, they've got to demonstrate to people that they are moving as quickly as possible and moving this towards a successful conclusion. And I think that hasn't been evident at times, and that's what needs to be demonstrated, because we're some way into the new season here, and it feels at times that we're not much further forward, Jay, than when you and I last spoke. So I think the onus is on the administrators. The time does matter. The longer we go on, you could argue that the viability gets sort of gets weakened. So it's not the case really that they can say, well, it will take as long as it takes. Well, it can't really. It's got to be moved forward now and move forward to a conclusion.
To add to that as well, in terms of the urgency, and it has to be done on a certain time scale, you've got to consider as well, there's no fan income due to the coronavirus pandemic, and the money won't last forever that we've got at the moment, because obviously the player sales have enabled wages to be paid for staff and players. But now we're looking at a time where fans won't be allowed back in the stadium as we thought they would be. Do you believe that the club could cease to exist and run out of money, run out of finances?
Well, that's the danger, isn't it? You as I was saying, you can't kind of fund yourselves in this way for much longer, because obviously the playing squad is obviously potentially going to be weakened further if we carry on like this, and then the league position and all of those things, and then it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling sort of downward spiral if we're not careful. I think what I would say is, rather than just loading all of the pressure on the administrators, we need to load some pressure on the game's authorities. I can't see how football at League One level, League Two and below is going to be sustainable over the coming period if there's not further support forthcoming from the Premier League. So, I think football has got an obligation. Wigan, in some ways, are the first out there, but there's a lot of other clubs that are not far behind. The dominoes will fall pretty quickly. So it's a big moment for English football. I think it's going to have to decide: is it going to help all of its industry through this pandemic? The government may well have a role, and I think there is going to be a case for government intervention. But I don't think, to be fair, the UK government could come in with a bailout package for English football without the Premier League contributing a significant amount towards that as well.
It's really important that you mentioned that, because I feel like the Premier League must intervene to help the lower league clubs, because they won't be able to survive. And as you mentioned, the government could also help out. But the sport minister, Nigel Huddleston, mentioned that the elite sport must find a way to support itself. So what do you think of that comment?
Well, they're not saying that to the arts, are they? And they're not saying it to other industries. So why are they saying that to football? We have a government here that says it wants to level up. It's all supposedly in favour of the North. Well, football clubs are the lifeblood of communities across the north of England. Even if the Premier League were to give some of its funding, you couldn't guarantee that would be enough to save clubs throughout the pyramid, and certainly the 92 Football League clubs. So, the government can't wash its hands of its obligation. The question that you've got to ask them, and I am asking them, is, this is hard for everybody, but what we're going to have left after COVID, it won't just be hard now. When we come through this, we'll have nothing around us, and we won't be able to level up communities like Wigan and Lee and other places if Lee Rugby League Club's gone, Wigan Athletic's gone. What's the point of that? Why are we fighting this virus to be left with nothing on the other side? Of course, the government has to step in to help the national sport. Of course, the national sport has to contribute itself. But we need a much better attitude from the government than that. If it claims to be the kind of champions of towns in the north, well, come on then, show it, because I don't believe it yet.
Are you aware of any plans to obviously try and avoid football clubs going bust in terms of the Football League and the government?
I get sort of whispers of discussions that have taken place, but I don't get any sense, Joe, that they've developed to any significant sort of stage. And it's urgent, isn't it? This is, well, it's hitting you right now. But as I say, I think there's a lot of other football clubs who are only a few paces behind you. So in the end, it's not going to be just Wigan's issue, is it? It's going to be a League One and a League Two issue very soon, I would imagine, because we've got this announcement today that the government's going to pay part pay wages. Maybe some football clubs will be able to benefit from that, but I would be surprised if that's anything other than a sticking plaster for clubs that are now going to be facing a pretty bleak winter. And the question will arise at some point: well, can we complete this league season? Because the Premier League, obviously, Championship, I'm sure they can, but Leagues 2 and 1, I don't know. And I think this is where the government's got to kind of realise this is heading. I just think if people can see the collapse of football alongside all the other pain we're going through, it's going to, I think, cause real unhappiness all around the country.
It's time to act now before it's too late. And have you had any football clubs contact you with any concerns about this?
Yes, I have. So I won't necessarily go through all of them, but I'm well aware of the concerns of a lot of football clubs about the situation that we're in. I've been in discussions with people who are concerned about the way football is run at the top of the sport. Those issues are coming up again. I personally think the time has come for the government to say, look, we will provide some money to football, but it comes at a cost, and that cost is independent financial regulation of football. And that means a proper fit and proper persons test. It means taking the role of financial regulation outside of the hands of the games authorities and creating an independent statutory regulator. I think it's come to that point because, and I mean no criticism here of the Football League. At times they have a sort of conflict of interest because obviously they want to save football clubs. They don't want to see any of their clubs go bust, to be fair to them. But that sometimes means they have to lower the bar then in terms of who they let in to run clubs, if you see what I mean. So there's a bit of a conflict there. And I think football has never shown itself to be a good regulator of money. It never has. It's not got a good relationship with money. It's never got the agents in check. It allows way too much murkiness in the game. And I think it'd be in everyone's interest to separate that financial regulation function from the game's governing bodies, create an independent regulator. And if I was in the government now, what used to be the Culture, Media and Sport Minister, what I would be saying to football would be quite straightforward. Here's the deal. We put some funding forward to protect the industry on condition that you put some funding forward and you accept an independent regulator, because we can't put public funds into football thinking that they may end up in the pockets of agents or administrators or whoever else in football. We've got to be sure that the public funds that are going in are going to be used to shore up the community assets. And I think the moment has come for that sort of deal, Jay. I think this could be a moment of, it's obviously a pivotal moment for Wigan Athletic Football Club, but it could actually be a pivotal moment for English football. And I hope that there are ministers in the government who have enough about them to say, right, let's make it a moment for change. Let's rebuild the kind of financial regulation of football because of the crisis it's now in.
Thank you for that answer. And I'm glad you mentioned as well the fit and proper persons test, otherwise known as the owners and directors test. Has there been any progress from the FL to reassess that and change it?
Well, I think they are. I mean, when we spoke to them with Lisa, I think they, in some ways inherited the whole mess, really, because of the changes in the Football League, the situation with Bury, really complicated stuff. And I think, the chairman wants to sort of improve some of the way these things work. And that was certainly the impression I got when I spoke to him. But, I think the scale of the issue that is facing football now is beyond the English Football League, to be honest. I think it's of a much bigger order that involves the Premier League, the FA, and everybody. And I think they're going to have to do a bit of soul searching. I personally think football needs to put an ask together to government, and in return, government needs to get ready to say, these are the conditions upon which we will give you any financial support. So, that's what I'm waiting to see develop.
That'd be really interesting to see. And in the Northwest and Greater Manchester region, we have seen Bury, Macclesfield, Bolton, Wigan all face extinction. Do you believe that there's a potential reason why this is happening just the Northwest, or is it a pure coincidence?
That's a good question. I think we have more football clubs, don't we, than other parts of the country. Pretty much every town has one here, whereas if you go down south, I think that isn't the case. Obviously, there's less money in some of our communities, so their ability to raise money from local business is probably lower in parts of the north than it is in other parts of the country. So I think those are probably the reasons I would give, Jay. I think the foundations of many of the towns in the north is not as strong as they are in other places. And this is what I kind of come back to. The government says it wants to level up places like Wigan. Well, it won't do that with no football club there. This club holds that community together. And I would say to them that if you believe in levelling up, if you let football clubs go bust, you can forget levelling up. That's finished, because these clubs hold these towns together, and the same is true of rugby league as well. They're going to have to step in and support rugby league clubs through this, because if they're linchpins in these towns, you take that linchpin out, what's left basically. It's a big question for the government. Now, I know any government would face it, and in some ways it's unfair for me to put all the pressure on them, but let's remember, they won an election saying that they would level up the country. And the truth of the matter is, if you look at what's happening right now, large parts of the north are being levelled down. We're under greater restrictions than the national restrictions. That's damaging our businesses. And I think the government's going to have to do something about this. Otherwise, as I say, we're going to come through COVID, and the north's going to be like it's going to be like a wasteland, because everything we care about will have gone, and so many people will have lost their jobs.
What did you think of the situation at Macclesfield Town?
I'll be honest, mate, I haven't looked at it in detail. I mean, I know there's been issues there over the years, but I haven't looked at it in detail. What happened there?
Obviously, at Macclesfield Town, they have obviously gone out of business now. They are no longer existing, and I feel like it's a massive shame to see. And obviously, you've been the Greater Manchester Mayor for many years now, and you've oversaw the administrations of Bolton, Bury, and Wigan. Have you been involved in all of them? And if so, what have you been able to do in those processes?
Yeah, not Macclesfield. I hadn't realised that they'd actually formally gone out of business. You told me something there that I didn't know. I know they were mired in problems, but that's a real sadness to hear that. I mean, they're obviously outside of the Greater Manchester border, and I have been involved in the Bolton and Bury situations, and of course now your situation. What I find is just how, in some ways, powerless everyone is. That's what I have found through all of these processes. The authorities seem powerless. The fans seem powerless. The council is powerless. And this is why I come back to this situation about the regulation of football. The levers aren't there to kind of hold those who are trying to profiteer out of football to account. Because in all of these cases, the power ends up in the hands of the forces that are kind of, trying, the financial forces end up gripping the whole situation. And actually the authorities, be they the games authorities or public authorities, have very, very little sway. But that can't be right, can it? Because if you look at football in other countries, for instance, Germany, it's much more difficult for private financial interests to get a stranglehold of football clubs. There's a very different system there where clubs have to be part owned by their supporters. And I would much prefer us to move in that direction. It's like in this country we've been prepared to sell everything to everywhere in the world. And I'm not against. That's not a xenophobic comment, by the way. I mean, I'm always in favour of outside investment coming into the UK and particularly into football. But you can bring investment in without putting the whole thing up for sale. And I think if you look at clubs in Germany, look at clubs in Spain, many of them are run as members clubs. Mutuals where no one person can come in and basically dictate the fate of that institution. And I think there's something for us to learn there as we kind of rebuild out of this.
Absolutely. And after the several administrations we've seen, have you learned anything that is helping you now with Wigan?
Only that it requires pressure from every single angle, and it requires vigilance. As I say, the control isn't necessarily with the games authorities or any public authority. We can have fallback intervention with regard to fraud or anything like that, but it's about pressure, and it's why I think you've done a brilliant job. I say it again, providing this sort of transparency and this inflow of information about what's going on, and the administrators, as I say, shouldn't resist it. They should embrace it, because it shows the level of care for the club. So, I mean, what I would say is you've just got to be vigilant, and you are being vigilant as a group of supporters. You're challenging everything, and rightly so, in my view. You can be appointed by the court, but that doesn't mean you're not accountable. And we've all got to demonstrate that we're acting in the best interests of this football club. And as I say, Jay, I'm prepared to give the administrators the benefit of the doubt because we need them to conclude this. But it's there's not much time left here, is there? Before people will say, "Well, hang on a minute. Why has this taken so long? What has this cost? Who's benefited from this process? Where has it left this football club?" Those questions are all out there, and they're getting sort of more urgent all of the time, aren't they? And it's incumbent on the administrators now to show that the public statements they've made, the challenge they gave back to me when I said, "What's going on here? Are assets being sold?" They need to now show that they've always been acting now in the interests of this football club, because we are all watching, and we know obviously these the company involved. We want them to do the right thing, but patience is beginning to wear a little thin.
Absolutely, and linking back to the administration and the circumstances of what happened at Wigan Athletic, we haven't actually spoke since the appeal verdict, and obviously the report following that. What was your opinion on the appeal and obviously the report that transpired afterwards?
I, again, haven't looked into it in all of the detail, but there's a question mark in my mind about whether it was a good use of the funds available to the club, given the grounds on which the appeal was made. I'm not sure. It was a well-judged appeal, but I wouldn't want to comment beyond that, Jake, because I'm not really, I'm not into the detail as much as you are. But I think all I can say is, as I've looked at this process as it's gone along, there've been decisions and things have happened have made me sort of like, look, really, is that, so that's all I can say. I mean, I'm sure others would have a defence to what they've done and why they did it, but I'm not sure. Even though the club's in a parlous financial position, have the funds available to the club been as used as well as they might have been? I don't know about that.
Are you almost baffled that we're still having these conversations now of finding a bidder?
A little, in that I know there's been a lot of interest in the club. So I honestly, obviously we've got non-disclosure agreements that mean that we don't have full information about why the interest hasn't been turned into a firm bid, and that's of course for the administrator to answer. But as I say, I mean, I go back to those conversations you and I were having when we were seeing the incredible fight that the players at the time were putting up, and sadly some of those players have now left. But I think I said to you at the time, who wouldn't want to be a part of this football club? And I'm sure Lisa feels the same. We feel it's a privilege to be part of this town. The people, they deserve the very best in my view, and they've not had the very best through this. I think they'd be hard pressed to say that people have been kind of treated properly throughout this whole process. It's not been a happy process for anybody.
It's been really harrowing to see. From the last competitive game the Championship Wigan had, the team that played against Fulham on that final day, only one player from the starting lineup remains at the football club as we speak. And I think that just shows the amount of change the fans have seen. And the fans have been a big part of the fight against obviously going out of existence and going out of business. And the club actually launched through the supporters club a fan-led bid or a fan-led campaign to have a stake in the football club. What have you made of that?
Oh, I've contributed. I thought it was brilliant. It was a little payment I made in respect of Leighton Baines. I think looking back on that transfer fee, we got that. We got a good bargain there. So I made a little contribution in respect of that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been fantastic to see the amount raised. Is it over $500,000 now? I can't,
Yeah, I believe it's at. I think last time I looked, I might be wrong. It was over £650,000.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I mean, but that again says everything to me. That you've got, something that tells you what this club means to people. Therefore, it tells any potential investor that there's other people who will be with them, and it will make their investment a worthwhile investment because people care. But the thing I'll just say, Jay, and I wanted just to say this directly so people understand, so there's no confusion. I commented in the summer about the sale of the training ground and the sale of the players, and the administrators challenged what I said. They came back to me and said I had no right to say what I said, and they said it was wrong. Now, if I can, through you, put this back to them to say, I am the kind of person that if I am wrong, then I will always admit that I am wrong, and I will come forward and say, well, actually, they did sell those things for good reasons because, it has helped in the end secure the future of the football club. But I'm not sure I am wrong yet. So I'm still watching this process, and that's my message to them tonight. I'll treat it fairly. I'll treat it in terms of the facts and what's happened here. I will judge this administration process on whether or not, number one, it achieves a successful outcome, because that is number one. But also number two, what has it cost? I noticed the statement that the administrators were taking no fees or getting no money. Well, if that's true, then that impresses me. But is that the whole story? And I would want transparency about that, about the money that this is, because this process has cost money, and I would want to know. I would want there to be transparency at the end of this, and that's what I would say back to them. If I've said something wrong, I will correct it. But it is incumbent on you now as administrators to show that everything you've done has been in the best interests of securing the viability of this club, rescuing this football club. And I think the honest answer, Jay, about that tonight is the kindest way I can put it is the jury is still out on that, and it's only the administrators that can give us the information for the jury to make a decision.
I think, yeah, that's very self-explanatory, and you've definitely came out in the open with a very strong comment to say to the administrators and appealing. If you are wrong, feel free to correct you, because like you said, you'd be the first to admit.
I want to be wrong, Jay. I want them to succeed. I want them to save Wigan Athletic Football Club. I want them to put it in the hands of someone who's going to care for the club. And yeah, I want the creditors to not be, as we've seen in other administrations, shafted. It's right that the creditors are respected. So I want them to achieve all of those things. And I appreciate that that's a hard thing to achieve at this moment in time. But I hope they won't mind me saying that I'm looking sceptically at times at this process in terms of the time taken, some of the decisions made. And I'm entitled to do that because it's my job to speak up for you and for the Wigan supporters and the people of the borough. And I will speak up for you, even if I'm accused of publicity seeking or political posturing. I'm doing none of those things, by the way. I'm simply trying to help save a football club, which I actually happen to care about quite a lot as well. So that's my message to the administrators tonight. If you pull these things off, or if you can explain why you tried in good faith and it just couldn't happen, then I'll be the first to say, well, okay, fair dues. But if that isn't the case, and that the wrong decisions have been made here, and that money hasn't gone where it should have gone, then I'll also be the first to call that out. And I hope that's a fair challenge that I've thrown out there tonight.
Thank you very much for that. And my final question is, I understand that no one knows for sure, but from the conversations we've had with Lisa Nunes and other individuals, do you think Wigan Athletic are going to have a successful resolution to this?
Well, I certainly hope so. I know there's a lot of good people trying to save this football club, and all the people who contributed to raise that money that you mentioned. There's a lot of good people involved. Lisa doing so much. I know the leader of the council is involved. There's a lot of other people around. I know people in the English Football League want to see the club saved. There's a lot of people who want to see this football club saved. And I've looked at administrations in the past, Jay. There are some, like Bury, that are much more complicated and involved than this one. It feels to me that this is relatively straightforward in some ways compared to others that I've seen in the past. So, yeah, we want them to succeed. And in some ways, the replies that some of the administrators have given to me that show that they are sensitive to what's being said and they care. It looks like that. And I certainly have got respect for Paul Stanley and what he's done in some of the things he's done in football. So, I think there are good people involved in this. Is what I'm saying, Jay. And I think what we've got to see now is a conclusion of it. So that we can, in the end, if we came out with a good, viable, considerate owner for Wigan out of this, with a chance to sort of preserve League One status because it doesn't drag on too long. I think I would be anyway, be able to say then, well, that was a football administration done well and done, with a result that we can all support. Whether we agree with everything that they've done, let's put that to one side. I think the key is here, get a successful outcome and get it as quickly as possible. And the administrators have still got a chance to do that. But the longer this takes, the more that sort of recedes a little bit from my point of view. And it just needs to be brought to a conclusion now.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much for your time this evening. It's been great to catch up with you, and it's been great to hear about your ideas about football and the financial regulations too.
No worries. What do you think about Everton, Jay?
What do I think about Everton? I think they're on fire at the moment, and I know you'll be delighted. I know you did a tweet which might have lost you a few votes of Everton at the top of the league.
Well, I tweeted it on Sunday night because we were top of the table on Sunday night. And I forgot, because you do, don't you, these days, the way games are being played at all sorts of strange times. Leicester were still playing at like 7 o'clock on Sunday night. I forgot all about it. So they went top. So it was it backfired somewhat, let's put it that way. But it was nice for the 2 hours or 3 hours while it lasted. But, keep the faith, all of you. I know you will. It's been a hard summer for everybody in the Wigan Borough and anyone who cares about Wigan Athletic, but you're still in there, you're still fighting, there's still a chance to save this football club. So I just want to say through you to all Wigan fans, keep the faith, keep fighting, and Lisa and I will be backing you all the way.
That's a wonderful message, and it fits in with the current club motto. The motto it's always been, keep the faith, progress with unity, and always keep believing, because I know the fans is all the club have got at the moment. We are the lifeblood of the club. We always have been. And it'll be down to the fans why the club will be saved in the end. And I know it's hard to keep confidence. It's hard to keep faith when all we get is negative news after negative news. But the one shining light is that the community of Wigan Athletic have got closer throughout this process. And I feel like when we do get through this, we'll have a lot stronger club and we'll be thankful for it in the end.
I agree.
But thanks so much. Thanks for your time, and thanks everyone for watching. And I'll see you guys for the next podcast.